Hello. Hello. My name is Sparkle Williams, and I'm running for governor. Hopefully, you already know that because it took quite an effort to get to the Zoom call. But I appreciate everyone's here, and I really do want to try to explain to people why I'm running, as well as what I would do if I were to be fortunate enough to be elected. So I have, in the past 3 years or so, lived kind of in a bubble here in Austin. And it basically is a very trans friendly community and it's a very LGBTQ community. But that has not been where I've lived all my life, and certainly not in Texas. I started off my career in Killeen. I moved to Wichita Falls. Even when I worked for Child Protective Services in Austin, I would still go to communities like Leon County, Grimes County, and other counties like that. So I do understand that the trans community is not as respected in other parts of the state as they are here in Austin. And that's something I'll be talking about. Now, whenever I try to envision making a presentation to others who are not LGBTQ friendly, I try to imagine how things would play out in front of an imaginary couple that I've named Claude and Myrtle, and they both are based on people I know. Some are parents. When I first went to college, my roommate was from Crane. I got to meet his parents, and I got to meet a number of other people throughout the years that I've been practicing law and been working as an attorney. Now, I will say that these are good-hearted people. They're not hateful people, but they do not understand the trans community. So let me just go through a very imaginary communication. We'll start with Myrtle. Claude, do you see some transgender persons running for governor? Claude responds, "Oh my God, not another one. What's this one want to be called? Z or Zo or thee or thou? Does he have a plan?" And Myrtle, "A plan? Of course he has a plan. They all have plans. All you really need to know is that he's transgendered." So let me just kind of respond to Claude and Myrtle. So the first thing, yes, as far as calling me Princess Sparkle is great. If it turns out that you feel uncomfortable about that because I'm not descended from royalty, you can call me Governor Sparkle, or anything else really will work. I'm somewhat a moderate on the whole pronoun issue. But as far as a plan, I got something better than a plan. I've got a gospel, and a gospel trumps a plan any day of the week. And my gospel is glitter, joy, and inclusion. So let me just kind of break it down. Glitter. I love wearing glitter. I love wearing bling. Not only does it make me feel better, I think it makes other people feel better as well. Now, joy. Joy, I'm not talking about some sort of hedonistic pleasure. I'm talking about the satisfaction one gets when you do something that makes a life better for either a human being or an animal. And that satisfaction is something that I find very, very rewarding. Then, of the last is inclusion. And this is perhaps the most important. Being trans, I now understand what it's like to go from a position of privilege to being a marginalized member of the community. And that's not something I wish upon anybody. And I think all of us in our life have had instances where we have been excluded people from joining our group. And I think we've always had the instances where we've been excluded ourselves. So we've excluded people and we've been excluded. And as much as joy we might get or thrill we might get of excluding somebody, it does not begin to amount to what happens when you are excluded. And that's what's happened here in Texas. We've got a very exclusive community, and I want to make it an inclusive community. Now, I'm not excluding billionaires from being part of the decision-making process. They're going to have the same right to participate as the homeless trans person. But all of us need to be part of the decision-making process. So that's what basically I'm going to be pushing today. It's a gospel of glitter, joy, and inclusion. Now, let me go through perhaps the most disturbing comment that Myrtle made, which was, all you need to know is he's transgender. Now, generally, if someone's saying that, it's not like, oh, you got to vote for him because they're transgender. They're basically saying, no, you don't want to even consider voting for somebody because they're transgender. And I have to tell you, this is what I think is very disturbing, because Texans, we tend as a group to exclude a lot of people, not just the trans, but people of different colors, different religions. And we got to stop that. We've got to become a society which values everybody's opinion. Now, as far as me being transgender, let me say that yes, I do experience gender euphoria. I know that's hard for people who has not experienced that to understand what it's like. For me, the closest thing I can use to describe it is when one has a runner's high from running. Now, in my youth, I ran a lot. I ran 39 marathons, and there'd be times when I would suddenly be a sense of euphoria. Everything was going right, and I feel invincible. Didn't last very long a lot of times, but when I had that feeling, it was wonderful. And the next closest thing I can think about is dancer's euphoria. I do a lot of dancing, and every so often I will get this feeling where suddenly the music hits and the sound hits and the spirit of the people in the classroom are great. And I have that same sense of invincibility. Now, again, that's not something, that's not exactly what everybody experiences. And some people who are trans have gender dysphoria, which is different from gender euphoria. But gender euphoria is not limited to me. My most famous example, I guess, is President Martin Van Buren, who was well known for wearing women's clothes, and yet that didn't seem to bother the rest of society. In fact, the campaign song, Tippecanoe and Tyler too, ends with them will beat little Van. Van is a used up man. Nothing about, well, Van wears women's clothes, or Van does all these things that we consider weird. They just call him a used up man. Now, since then, of course, you've got Rudy Giuliani. You even had J.D. Vance having a moment in drag, which was all sort of part of this continuum. Again, I'm much more further down the continuum than a lot of people are, certainly more than J.D. Vance, but I'm not sure I'm that much more than Rudy Giuliani. And the problem is when you have this feeling of where you love the gender euphoria and you're cut off from it, it makes it very difficult for you to go ahead and live your life to your fullest. So let me just go through some of the things that, besides I've already talked about the glitter, joy, and inclusion. Let me just talk about some of my specific proposals. And first is the legalization of marijuana. I mean, my gosh, this is the 21st century. Texans, I mean, now we're fighting over TCP, but even that is something that shouldn't be there. And what we've learned from the battle over TCP is the big reason that there's such opposition is that the alcohol and beverage, the alcohol industry has come in, spent lots of money to try to defeat marijuana. Not because they're doing it for the good of the state of the state of Texas, or for Texans. They're doing it because they want to continue to make their profit. Now, I'm not faulting them for that, but we don't have to listen to them. So legalization of marijuana, one of the big things on my program. Second, elimination of capital punishment. We've had instances in Texas. It was very clear that if things had gone the way it was supposed to, and if there hadn't been delays, innocent people would have been executed. And that's certainly a very much concern. It's also a financial concern. But also, I have experienced firsthand being an acquaintance of someone who's a victim of capital murder. And I didn't like the person I became. When my first job out of law school, I was legal advisor to the Killeen Police Department. And Carl Levine was one of the police officers at Killeen. He ended up moving to Harker Heights, which was his neighboring suburb. And he was shot to death when he made a traffic stop of an individual named Thomas Barefoot. And there is nothing good that people could say about Thomas Barefoot. He was a criminal. He had been guilty of rape of a child. He has nothing good that you can talk about him. And I was so caught up, and yes, we need to execute him, that I did not like the person I became. And sure enough, when Thomas Barefoot finally was executed years after the murder of Carl Levine, I didn't feel a sense of satisfaction at all. In fact, I felt a very much a letdown feeling. Carl was not back. He was not restored to life. And I felt very, very depressed to realize that what I thought was going to be a wonderful feeling wasn't there. And I didn't like the fact that I was actually rooting for someone to be executed. So I think we need to get rid of capital punishment for so many levels. But one, we just don't want to be a society that glories in putting somebody to death. Now, a third issue, and one that I probably should have led with because it's so important to me, is that we need to treat state employees and all public employees much better than we do now. We need to pay them what they're worth. We need to, when they retire, we need to go ahead and give them a proper retirement. The state of Texas retirees, of which I'm one because I've worked for 28 and a half years for the state of Texas, we've not had a cost of living adjustment since the year 2001. And that's way too long for that to occur. So one of the provisions of my platform will be having a constitutional amendment to make sure that retirees of the state do get cost of living adjustments on a regular basis. Waiting 24 years to get one is just no good. The amount of buying power has diminished tremendously. And of course, we need to pay our current employees well as well. Now, I would like to go beyond just public employees who work for the state of Texas. I do have a proposal, the public employee tax holiday, in which we would let those who are public employees be free from sales tax one day a month to make sure that we do reward people working for the public. It's hard work. The public is not a good employer. Oftentimes they are not good at all. Now, let me just go through a couple of my other things I really want to talk about. I want to talk about the need to have a constitutional amendment protecting the patient-physician relationship from state interference. So a woman who desires an abortion, whose doctor has approved it, would not be allowed to have the state interfere with that with my constitutional amendment. Same, somebody who has gender affirming care like myself, we would not have the state be able to interfere with the gender affirming care. So that's something that I also think is very important. There's so many other issues that I do want to bring to everyone's attention. I think we have to realize that we do have a state which is built on systemic racism, and we have to figure out a way to try to remedy that, whether that is reparations or whether that is some sort of other proposal. Now, I know the state has currently gotten rid of the diversity programs, but we really need to rethink that whole issue. Climate issues is another issue. We are doing terrible damage to our Earth. Again, I'm just giving you a small tip of the iceberg of proposals that I'm going to have. I'm going to have a lot more as we work our way through. So this is sort of an idea. Now, I would like to continue what happens next. Well, I am not going to be a martyr to the issue of being a trans candidate. One of my friends, when I was kind of complaining about problems of being a candidate, made the remark, well, at least you haven't been murdered. I kind of thought that would happen after a month or half ago, after about a month or half of campaigning. And obviously, my friend John knows nothing about Sparkle. I do not have a heroic cell in my body. I think I had one in 2012, but I had a nosebleed and it exited my body, and I have not had one since then. So I'm not going to the macho MAGA rallies. I'm not going to do things to invite myself facing some sort of physical violence. I am going to try to implement Zoom, and I'm going to go to those places which I consider friendly. So one, don't expect heroics. That's not Sparkle. Two, uh, do expect that I will not only use Zoom for this call, but we are going to start a series with my good friend Susie Epstein, and we're going to be going ahead and interviewing people who bring issues to Texans and to people who are outside of Texas, but of issues of importance. One of the issues we're going to start with is the whole problem of systemic racism. But we're going to talk about other issues as well. We're going to talk about the problems of our rights being violated. And we've got a number of potential guests lined up, and we'll just need to work that out. Again, we're not going to always have it at the same time because that won't work for our guests and it won't work for Susie and me, but we will post everything on Zoom, and we'll let you know when. I'm sorry, not on Zoom, on the campaign website, and we will go ahead and try to do all we can to let people know what we've discovered. And again, we're doing this just not only for the voters, but for ourselves. A lot of things that we want to particularly learn about. Susie is very much involved in disability rights, and that's something she may actually be the person that we'll talk to. So she may at times vary from being the interviewee and the interviewer. So let me go ahead then and throw it open to questions, and then we'll go from there.
So Glenna or Sparkle?
Yes.
Yeah, I had seen on your website before that you had talked some about opposing the school voucher program,
Yes.
but would like to hear some about that and how you feel about making sure all children in Texas are fed.
Well, as you unfortunately may realize, the voucher program was a big scam to allow private schools and to make lots of money. And basically, it looks like wealthy people are going to be the ones who benefit from this program. Now, what I don't want to do is have somebody start in a private school and then suddenly pull from it. But I'm going to limit the program as much as possible. In other words, if a student spends 1 year on at a private school, I don't want them to have to leave that school. I was uprooted between my junior and senior year of high school, and I don't wish that on anybody. However, I do want to limit the program to make sure this program, which right now is 1 billion, apparently is very likely will expand to 8 billion if the mega crowd get their way. Now, as far as food, I definitely am in favor of the state of Texas making sure the children are adequately fed by nutritious meals. One of the Republicans who I actually admire is Susan Combs, who's a very good friend of mine. And when she was Agriculture Commission, she managed to develop a nutritious program, which has gone totally out the window when Sid Miller became Agriculture Commission. And as much as I love my junk food, I really don't want our kids to be fed that or force that in school. But thank you very much, Joseph. That was a very good question.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Any questions for Sparkle?
Well, I do have one that was submitted in advance, and I'll go ahead and I've kind of cleaned it up a little. It's somebody who basically does not think my running for governor is a good idea. And the question starts with, have you lost your freaking mind? Again, I'm cleaning things up because of the wanting this to be a family-friendly campaign announcement. And don't you know that only rich people or people who have friends who are wealthy run for governor? and you don't even own a car. Well, let me start off by saying lots of Texas governors have not owned cars. Sam Houston did not own a car. So did a number of other people. So that is not something that should be a disqualifier. But, and admittedly, I don't have millionaire friends. I don't have, or I may have a couple, but they don't act like millionaires if they are. And I certainly don't have billionaire friends. But I still think that should not disqualify me from being governor. And of course, the issue of, well, how are you going to compete? And that was the next part. How are you going to compete with the Greg Abbotts of this world? And it'll be a challenge. I think it'll be a challenge for anybody to compete with him. But I do have something going for me. And besides my glitter, joy, inclusion gospel, I do have a strong belief in a higher being. My higher being is not that Old Testament God that basically, put everybody into place. She's more creative than that. And kind of give you an example how she's worked in the past. My very first marathon was in Corpus Christi, September of 1979. And it was a terrible time to be running a marathon. Corpus Christi is incredibly hot, incredibly humid at that time. And I started off with everybody else, and there weren't that many runners, but most of the people ran much faster than I did. And I was so hot and I was so miserable. And I suddenly came to mile 25 and I was just about ready to check it in. And a group of little children started to chant, "Don't die, don't die, please don't die." And that made me start to chuckle and it got me through the race. And I attribute my inclusive creative God for helping me through that. And as a result, I ended up running 38 more marathons, all of them a lot faster than that one, but it really did help me a lot. So I'm hoping that I will have that. Of course, anybody really worried about whether me competing with Greg Abbott, on the website, there is a Act Blue opportunity. And there's also a possibility that you can either send in a check or do Venmo. So I certainly am not trying to discourage people from getting through, but I do have some degree of confidence that things will work out okay. So that's my last question. Jojo, are we ready for the campaign song?
Sure. Give me 1 second and I'll bring it up. And then we're going to end off with, oh, we got somebody coming in. Let me let them in real quick. And then we will end off with a final comment from you. So hold on 1 second and I'll bring it up.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to get on, even with
That's
all
okay.
your
That's
detailed
okay.
instructions.
That's okay, Gary. We're about finished. Jojo stepped in for you as co-host.
All right, give me 1 second here. I'm bringing up the video now. And this is on the website, just so you all know, sparkleforgovernor.com. And you can donate there through Act Blue, or also, as she mentioned, there are ways you can give via check or via Venmo, and that's all on the website as well.
Try just keep fighting, 'cause it hurts to hide. Put your makeup on, boy, you know you're not gonna die yet. It's your party now, you know who you are. Put your makeup on, boy, you know you're not gonna die yet. Get your favorite dress and your glitter on. Put your makeup on, boy, you know you're not gonna die yet. It's your party now, you know who you are. Put your makeup on, boy, you know you're not gonna die yet. Get your favorite dress and your glitter on. You know who you are, and you don't know the many thing. You know who you are, and you don't know the many thing. You know who you are, and you don't know the many thing. You know who you are, and you don't know the many thing. You know who you are. You know who you are. You know who you are. You know who you are.
Oh,
And you don't know the many things.
what'd you say?
Just say hello.
Hello.
Hello as well.
And don't forget that beautiful dancer at the start of the cameos.
Yeah, I caught that.
Well, okay. So you know who you are, and you now know who I am. So let's make beautiful music together. Yay! Thanks everyone for coming.